What's up, everybody? It's Reggie Williams, founder and CEO of Ambrosia for Heads. And with me, I have Jake Payne, our editor-in-chief. And together, this is our What's the Headline podcast. And for those of you watching instead of listening, got a couple different backgrounds going on. Where are you these days?
Man, I'm in Pittsburgh right now visiting family. I usually, I'm not a curtains guy like behind me like that. But yeah, man, pay no attention to the man in front of the curtain.
Yeah.
What about you?
One of my favorite episodes of ours is the infamous one where your mom made the cameo. That was
So it's hilarious, man. Like there's this first of all, I'm not a blogger. I've never been a blogger. I'm a 20-year, entertainment music journalist who's primarily worked in hip hop. But there's all, I don't know if you know, like there's this stigma of like quote unquote bloggers living in their mom's basement. So it's just poetic justice that I've done a few of these episodes when I'm visiting family. So yeah, man.
Super hot fire on me. I'm not a rapper, man. I'm not a
rapper. What about you, man? Where are you at?
I'm in LA, man. It's a beautiful day yesterday, just checking out the scenes. Yeah, so good. Just in the hotel room posting up,
Dope, man. You getting your LL Cool J going back to Cali vignette of all the different cool spots out there?
Exactly. Yeah. Yesterday was cheat day, man. So I had all the trappings. It was great.
Man, yeah. For those that don't know, Reggie is the most disciplined person when it comes to diet and fitness I've ever met. And but his cheat days, man, it's like that scene, where the fat boys walk in the Sbarro, all you can eat, man. It's impressive,
Absolutely. That's a great reference, man. Shout out to our 1984 podcast. We talked about that being the greatest, argued that was one of the greatest years in hip hop. That brought Crush Groove, right? And no, actually Crush Groove was 85, but the Fat Boys and Run DMC and a lot of that great stuff, man.
So, absolutely, man. The year I was born too. So there you go. And yeah, man, rest in peace to, Buffy and Prince Marky D.
Yeah. And speaking of 80, this is our 80th episode.
Absolutely, man. It feels like, it's crazy too, because it was springtime 2020. You and I started What's the Headline on a whim, man. You texted me and you're like, hey, all this stuff is going on. I kind of miss talking about hip hop and we have a platform and it doesn't feel like 80 episodes, but I am so proud, man. Look at how far we've come.
Yeah, it's dope, man. It's dope. Thank everyone who's rocked with us, whether it's one episode or 80. We definitely appreciate it.
Yeah.
Great week in hip hop. A lot of stuff to talk about. Let's get this out of the way so we can get into the more meaty stuff. But Will Smith, we didn't talk a ton about it last week because it already had been beaten to death in the press. But latest development is he was banned for 10 years from the Academy. He can't attend the Oscars. He can be nominated. He can win. He just can't attend or vote or anything like that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, man, I think it's a bit extreme. I think the whole thing is just blown a lot out of proportion. And I know I use this catchphrase a lot. I say this as a white guy, but I feel like would the same type of punishment or consequences have existed for others? And there are Academy Award winners. There's legendary filmmakers, actors who have done illegal, crazy, heinous things that have never been handed down this type of penalty. So just comparing one to the other, especially in the wake of what happened to Kevin Hart 4 years ago, and those, that discourse, right or wrong, it's just a very interesting kind of touchstone moment. That's my take. What's yours?
I'm gonna go the exact opposite on this one. Okay. I think it's a completely meaningless thing. I think the most important thing is he gets to keep his Oscar. I think that would have been over the top and not justifiable if they'd taken his Oscar. But the reason why I say that this is meaningless is because I don't believe that Will Smith has been to the Oscar. Typically the only people who go to Oscars are the people who have a project that is up for consideration, nomination or something like that. Otherwise, you don't go. There's no point. Why are you going to sit through the 3 hours? And occasionally, especially with shows like the Grammys, even people who are up for awards don't go. He and Jada famously boycotted in 2016 because Will was not nominated for, I think it was
It was the NFL story.
Concussion. Yeah, he wasn't nominated for concussion, so they didn't go there. But if you go back and check, I highly doubt they went to any since Ali. And do you know when Ali was?
Was that like 2004?
I think the film was 2001, man. So that means the Oscars would have been 2002. So Will hadn't been to the Oscars in almost 20 years. So, you know, it's possible that he gets a role that he's nominated for. Although I think that's the thing. I think that I think he's got to overcome what could potentially be, you know, being blackballed. He's had a couple projects paused and put on hold, things like that. But assuming that he gets some roles, I don't know if he'll get the political clout to actually get nominated. So it might not, he might not ever go back, and might not want to go back at any point. You know, maybe a lifetime achievement type thing. I do think though, within 10 years or so, if he comes back, if he plays it right, he could have the ultimate comeback story. You know, America loves a comeback story. They love to build people up, then tear them down, and then, you know, build them up again. So if Will, you know, transitions into some, or keeps this transition going into meatier, more complex roles, I could see him possibly winning another Oscar in 10 years or so. But, you know, the band, he had already resigned from the Academy himself. I don't think he was going to the show. He can still win awards, so I just don't see any teeth in it.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you that it's important that he got to keep the award. I also agree that you know, everyone loves a comeback story, and I think that in 10 years, provided, you know, good health and all of that, active careers, any punishment is always set up for a reward. We've seen that other times. But yeah, I don't know. I beg to differ a little bit, but I haven't. When I was a kid, I was telling somebody this during the award show. Like, I remember me and my mom would watch the Oscars. Like, that was a thing, and you would always see, you know, Jack Nicholson and Meryl Streep. And sometimes I feel like they were in movies. Like, I think of people like Warren Beatty, this like old Hollywood, and there were times where they were involved, but it felt like even when they weren't, they were still there. And I feel like the Smiths have become a fixture of new Hollywood, and I think they're two people that I expect to see at an award show. So I do disagree with you a little bit there, but I don't know. You know, my answer might seem hella woke, but it's just been odd to watch so much discourse and so many, you know, Amy Schumer saying, you know, how concerned she was when it happened over the rushing on the stage. I don't know, man. I think there's a lot to unpack there. And I think the whole thing has just gotten a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, you know, I'll put that just, I would say go back and take a look through a different lens, through your professional media lens at old Oscars, and see if those dots I was talking about connect, you know, because I do think that as kids, we don't realize the politics and stuff that's going on. But I will say this, that if they're going to hand out that punishment for him, they should retroactively and go back and do that for others who have had arguably more egregious violations, albeit not on camera in front of the world, but been convicted of, you know, sexual crimes and things like that. You know, I think that, yeah, absolutely, those people should be addressed in the same way. You know, in terms of the discourse in the media, yeah, I mean, we've seen the whole spectrum. It is what it is. You know, people have their opinions. It's been a hot story. People don't want to focus on meaty things like Russia and the fact that food prices are up almost 10% and gas prices are up, you know, like 50% or whatever it is. But, you know, that's the culture we live in.
It is. It is. And one last thing on it, you know, over the years, I've been watching footage over the last couple of weeks. It comes into my timeline. I mean, the Beastie Boys, you know, Nathaniel Hornblower or ODB. I mean, we all know Kanye and Taylor. There's a long history of people, you know, rushing the stage. Obviously, the slap or the smack is different. And then for the Oscars, which just has, you know, 94 years or whatever of history, to have obscenities shouted out from the seats, it's a lot. And yeah, it's very interesting, because I think we're living in a time where we all see that by rushing the stage or creating a moment like that, you can go viral and you can eclipse those bigger issues that you're talking about. So perhaps the 10 years is to set a standard, to make sure that the next 10 or next 5 doesn't have that sort of moment, whatever it could be.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that's one of the saddest things that no one is talking about, that the fact that this guy is the third Black man to win. As it's third, or second. Sidney Poitier won supporting or lead. I can't remember. It's him, Sidney, and Denzel to win. That level of Oscar, and no one is talking about it. But positive news though. We've been waiting for something for years now. I've been hearing rumors about it. It's been confirmed several times by the participants, but it's not been released or any release date discussed until now. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, man, the week was ending, and on Friday we received confirmation that Black Star's follow-up, 24 years after Mos Def and Talib Kweli, our Black Star, will arrive May 3rd. We have, this storyline has been almost 4 years in the making. For years, I think Yasin doesn't do a lot of press. Yasin Bey, formerly Mos Def, and Talib, I feel like anytime he does press run, people always ask him about Black Star. And there's been lingerings and there's been appearances, and you attended a concert a few years ago. But in 2018, it was revealed that there was a second album in the works and that it was going to be produced by Madlib. So boom, here we go, May 3rd. It's called No Fear of Time. And it's interesting. Over the last 3.5 years, one of the holdups that I've heard, apart from obviously the pandemic and being strategic about when you release music, is both of these guys were figuring out, in their words, I'm paraphrasing, but the right situation. And I think Yasin in particular was adamant about that. I mean, Kweli has his own label. He's put out a lot of projects through the years. And Yasin has we all kind of remember in 2006, way before Yeezus, his album, I think it was his third album, True Magic. It was just a CD and a clear case. Like, Yasin has often played with art versus commerce. In 2019, he put an album, Negus, is how it's spelled. I'm not going to say it, but it premiered in museums as an exhibition. He's been doing a lot of different things. So when they were talking about this, I was like, oh man, they're looking for a label situation. They're looking for the right ownership. But oddly enough, it's going to arrive through their Luminary podcast platform, which, is that a name you were familiar with?
No, I was not.
Same. And it's the podcast home of The Midnight Miracle, which is a podcast that Yasin, Talib, and Dave Chappelle do sporadically. It's not a weekly joint, sort of like you and I. I think they do it when they're all in a room together and there's things worth talking about, or there's a guest worth interviewing. But this goes beyond the system. And if you go to the latest episode of that, it confirms the guests on the album, or at least it appears to. And the guests on No Fear of Time include Questlove and Black Thought from The Roots, Rock Marciano, comedian Michelle Wolf, one of my favorite comedians, an MC people may know, Narcy, formerly known as Narcissist, one of Talib Kweli's longtime collaborators and artist, Nico Yis, who's been a very active AFH supporter, and Radio Raheem, which I don't know who that is, but obviously an allusion to Do the Right Thing. In addition to Talib and Yasin, it's executive produced by Dave Chappelle, which is interesting because one of the times that I think we can all think of as Black Star fans beyond the album, was some of the work that they did with Chappelle's Show in the early 2000s. But it's very exciting news for me. And I wanted to ask you, the first album, so this is a new collaboration of these guys and Madlib. The first album came out on Ruckus Records in '98, produced by High Tech, J Rolls from Lone Catalyst, 88 Keys, a host of different people, Sean J. Period, I think. How do you feel in theory of a Black Star album produced by Madlib in 2022?
Well, I'm super excited. You said the news broke 2018. Is that when we first started talking about it? Or was
yeah, I mean, we had always heard bumblings that there would be an album. In 2018 is when we learned it's with Madlib.
Right. So the thing that excites me about that is that Bandana came out in 2019. Mm-hmm. And that's Madlib and Freddie Gibbs. That was my favorite project of that year. I think it was either yours or one of your top 5 for sure. Mm-hmm. I thought that album was incredible. So that says to me that it's probably similar sound because the album was done supposedly back then. So it's probably Madlib in that bag. And so I'm very excited to hear Black Star with Madlib music from that period, especially because it's some of my favorite Madlib music ever. I think but to his credit, he is also really adept at maintaining his sound, but tailoring it also to the artist that he's working with. He doesn't overpower the artist; he lets them be them. So I think it's going to be phenomenal. I remember all the coverage of those who said they've heard it have said that it's amazing. So I have no doubt that Yassine and Talib are incredible on it. I'm a huge fan of Black Star. That raucous era from 98 to 2002 or so, 2003 is probably my second favorite period in hip hop, to that 1993 to like 1997, 98 period.
Okay.
I think it is incredible. It ushered in the underground in a lot of ways, created the space that you and I cover as much as we do now. It restored my faith in hip hop. It brings back memories of going to Fat Beats and walking and looking at vinyl and listening to Eclipse and others who were spinning there at the time. Like, it's just a dope era, and I think the Talib and Yassine have done a great job of keeping themselves relevant over the years, releasing solo music, touring together, doing features and stuff like that. So I'm excited for it. I'm very excited for it.
Yeah, I am too. I would probably put Respiration by Black Star if I had 5 all-time favorite hip-hop songs, and obviously Common's part of it too. That makes the list. I love the way the first album was produced, and High Tech in particular was integral to that. And it's interesting though, because at that same time, I've been a Madlib fan since Loot Pack and Yesterday's New Quintet. But to watch him evolve, and I agree with you, I think 2019 Bandana, we talked about Grammy snubs last week. That album was robbed, only to see Freddie Gibbs get nominated the following year for an album with Alchemist. I'm excited about this one. To your point, there's some conflicting news. There's a statement that Talib made with the album, and I'll read it here. He says, about 3 to 4 years ago, I was visiting Yassine in Europe, and we started to talk about songs to do on an album. So I flew an engineer out just to see what it would be. Once I realized this conversation is starting to organically become a creative conversation, I started making sure to have the engineer around at all times. There was one day where we were just in a hotel listening to Madlib beats, and he was like, play that Madlib tape again. I'm playing beats, and he starts to rhyme to the beats, and that's how we did the first song. So that's all true. But what's interesting is on the latest episode of their podcast, they say that this album was recorded in summer of 2020 and spring of 2021 in Ohio, which provided would be, Dave Chappelle's, property in Yellow Springs, not far from Dayton. I think that's really interesting. I mean, to go from, and first of all, an album made in the pandemic, you and I spent time on one of the early episodes of this podcast, kind of saying, what will that be? What will that feel like? How will hip hop and music sound different? As a result of this, but also to go from an album that they made in New York City and Brooklyn, a lot of like pre-tracking and kind of like low-key studios in those Hunger Pains ruckus years on up, it's going to be an interesting contrast. And based on what Talib said there, I wonder if Madlib was part of the creative process, or he was just somebody who's just supplying beat tapes like Dilla also did at times. So I'll be really curious. There was a video that released like 16 seconds long with the news on Friday. You can go to ambrosiaforheads.com and hear it. It's a little bit of presumably music from the sessions or from the projects. There have been some teasers over the last 3.5 years, but I'm excited. And the fact that it's coming in less than a month, this could be, you and I often do check-ins of like, what's the biggest album so far? What's our personal picks of album of the year? I mean, we haven't gotten to talk about Black Star in that level, in the time you and I have known each other, plus almost another 10 years. It's wild.
Yeah, let's talk about the Luminary piece. So, we've seen some pretty high level releases lately on unique platforms. Started with Dr. Dre with the GTA release inside a video game. The internet is undefeated, and so we had that music, even though it was exclusively available on GTA. We had it on YouTube within a matter of hours of when it was released. Mm-hmm. But it took 3 months or so for it to hit DSPs. It wasn't until around Dre's Super Bowl appearance that we actually got the music on DSPs, and it's still kind of wonky. It's not done as an album. It's just a bunch of singles from Dr. Dre. You got to put it together yourself. And then we had Kanye with the Donda 2 release on his stem player, which costs $200. It allows you to break down all the individual parts of the music and create your own mixes and everything, which sounds like a cool concept. I have not seen any of that music online, but truthfully, I haven't searched for it either.
So have you heard Donda 2?
No, I haven't searched for it. So I assume it's out there because, again, the internet's undefeated. But I mean, have you searched for it? Have you heard any of it?
I haven't searched for it. I was sitting in an Uber with a friend a few weeks ago, a friend who was ready to throw down the 200, and I was kind of clowning him a little bit. And I was like, for what? You're not a producer. Like, what are you going to do with these stems? And in sheer irony, the Uber driver's like, I already pre-ordered it. I'm going to remix it. And I was like, damn, in this car alone is $400, spent on this album. And I honestly, like you, I haven't sought out a review. I haven't paid much mind to it because there's other things to cover. And yeah, I mean, this has happened in different iterations before. Like even Dre's Compton forever was only Apple Music, and I bought it the night it dropped. But it was crazy in 2015 how rare I listened to it. I bought the CD later on, and it's funny how music habits have changed. But you're absolutely right. Like, and for Yasin Bey in particular, he's put out albums since The Ecstatic. You and I just haven't heard them unless we went to a museum. But I know people, Will Ketchum, who we both know, he's been, he's on staff at Mike. He went to the museum and heard it. But like, it's weird to know how that competes in the traditional album space. So this one I'm curious about, because Luminary podcasts, you can listen wherever you listen to this podcast. My suspicion is this album will release on May 3rd. And I bet you by May 10th, it'll be, if it's not already, it'll be wherever things are. I don't know if Luminary is going to serve as an exclusive distribution platform, as, a jump ahead. Is it just going to be in place of a label? But I think that Black Star in particular will be hard pressed not to make their music widely available. And if they do, like you said, the internet is always undefeated.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it a lot with Tidal too. Jay released 444 exclusively on Tidal, but again, that was available like instantly. Same thing with Magna Carta Holy Grail, I think was a collaboration with Sprint.
Right.
Lemonade. I think in all those cases, it definitely hurt the commercial performance of the albums, especially since those illegitimate copies aren't counted. And ultimately, they did find their way to streaming platforms. And since then, Jay, Beyonce have gone back to more traditional, like released everywhere. So you said Luminary is available on all podcast platforms. So I'm wondering if they are going to release it, it's just you got to listen to it as a podcast instead of like as an album. And if that's the case, then I don't think that's any different. And that's kind of a cool way to bring shine to the podcast. But if it's behind some sort of wall, like a paywall, like a Patreon or something like that, then I think it could be difficult.
Well, let me ask you an honest question, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you are one of the people that paid $100 for Crenshaw, right?
No.
Oh, okay, I thought you were.
I was not. I thought about it, and I would have. I just didn't get around to it. I was not against the price. In fact, I love the hustle. I love the fact that Nipsey valued his music that way, and I was such a big supporter of his movement back then. I wanted to do it. I can't remember why I didn't do it, but yeah, I was a fan of the move for sure.
Yeah, it was different. I mean, at that time, if there was a store on my block, I personally wouldn't say that I would have, especially just where my life was at 2013. But I've spent, I guarantee you, close to 6 figures in music throughout my life. I've never had a problem with supporting it. If Black Star in particular wants $50 or $100 for this album, I'd probably give it to him, because the first album had that kind of impact in my life. And, Kanye's had tremendous impact on my life, but maybe the Donda brand, the first album didn't grab me. We've talked about this on the podcast. I didn't feel compelled for $200 for an exclusive player, but I'm truly excited by this. I'm really curious to see, what it means to both of their careers at this point. Yasin is kind of a nomad, global traveler, all of these things. Talib, has made one of my favorite interview podcasts with People's Party. He's done a bunch of things, continues to make music. But right now, he's at kind of a slower season when it comes to music. Last year, he put out the Gotham project with Diamond D, which was really cool. But as far as like solo Talib, we haven't gotten that, and certainly haven't got Black Star. So I think this will be a stone in the sand, and no matter what.
Yeah, the difference with Nipsey from those other projects is that he put out a free version too at the same time. You can get MP3s, you could download the mixtape, but if you wanted the CD and be part of that club, you should pay for it. And I remember that line. I think it was on Count Up My Loot on Mailbox Money, where he said Jigga purchased, Jigga did something when he made that purchase, like paid $1,000 because it was worth it. Like I love that line, man. And yeah, so let me ask you this: if it is behind a paywall, will you pay up whatever it takes to listen to this album?
Not whatever it takes, but I would probably go up to $100. I don't mind supporting these guys, and I was one of those kids that sent in the mailer for a Ruckus Records T-shirt and all of that stuff over the years, and have supported this group. I've never, I've seen live, certainly with you. I've seen Reflection Eternal on the road. I've seen Talib a few times. I don't know that I've ever seen Black Star together. So yeah, I often look at that, like all the years I would have gone to a show, happy to do it. I do like what you said as an aside, the one track thing. I mean, De La Soul put out that Nike project around like 2009 or something like that. And those Nike collaborations, they did another one with LCD Sound System. They would just kind of like 2 or 3 track it, and you would really have to listen as a lean back experience to enjoy the music. And if you check out the latest podcast episode that features Yasin, Talib, and Dave talking about it, these guys are really, this No Fear of Time title, I think it's in reference to the fact that, look, they've comfortably waited 25 years just about to put out this album. In the episode, Yasin talks about how the CEO of Twitter recently made a comment, again, I'm paraphrasing, that if artists are frustrated with their income from Spotify on music, they can't live in the old model of releasing an album every 5 years. You need to stay consistent. And I think that he's kind of bucking that statement, which you and I have spent a ton of time speaking about, quantity versus quality. I will always be in favor of quality. And if they are kind of thumbing their nose or going above and beyond the usual powers that be to make art available, I applaud that, even though, this podcast is obviously available in all those usual formats. So
yeah, I support it too. I think the power is in the hands of the creators, and a lot of times creators don't leverage that power. I will definitely, pay, I don't think they'll beat people over the head. I'll pay whatever subscription fee or whatever it is to purchase it. We'll be happy to do that to support these guys. I'm really, really ready for May 3rd, right?
Yes, May 3rd. Yeah.
Word. So there was some incredible releases this week too. We got something from ScHoolboy Q, which we'll talk about a bit later. One of my favorite Q tracks in a long time. But one of the biggest and most anticipated songs, I'd say, was Pusha T released his song, Neck and Wrist. This is Pusha's second release off his upcoming album, which he's already said is the album of the year. The first one being Diet Coke. And that was produced by Ye, right?
Yes. Yeah. And this one is produced by Pharrell Williams, the man that, most of us associate with bringing the clips to the fold.
Yeah. So Diet Coke, when I first heard it, I was like, oh, okay, all right. But on third or fourth listen, I loved it. It's actually one of my favorite songs on our Spotify playlist right now. I think Pusha just goes to work lyrically on it. I think that the beat suits his flow incredibly well. I think it's a dope song. This one I heard and I was super excited for it because their collaborations in the past have been off the charts. Drug Dealers Anonymous remains one of my favorite songs from both of them. I think they both just blacked out on that song. I gotta say, on first, second, third, fourth listen, however many times I've heard it now, I don't love this song. I don't love the chorus. I don't like Pusha's flow at all. It goes high at the end of each, bar. Jay's verse is slick, and we're going to talk about that, but also didn't kill me from a flow perspective. That just this one was just very underwhelming to me as a song. But the weird thing is, after only hearing it one time, I woke up the next day and it was the first song that popped in my mind, and I can't get the hook out of my head.
Yeah.
And the beat. So it is super catchy, and it's one of those songs where I think by year's end I'll probably like it, or at least it'll be one of those songs you just can't deny. So, but what were your thoughts on the song sonically?
We might disagree a little bit about Will Smith. We agree on this one. I flashback to 2016. I thought Drug Dealers Anonymous was the collaboration I felt like I had been waiting at least 10 years for, probably more like 14 or 15. Push has made a number of records over the years that I feel like have subconsciously tried to beckon Jay-Z for the remix. The most obvious one for me is Numbers on the Boards, which is one of my absolute favorite Pusha records. And it even, they scratched in Jay in the song. And here we go, this collaboration. And whereas DDA I thought was phenomenal, I loved the political implications of Jay using that moment to kind of clap back at Tomi Lahren and some other people that were dragging his past into his present. This one musically, and so in terms of its substance, I would agree with what you said. I don't think it's bad by any measure. I think the song is cool. I like the production. It's a different sound for me from Pharrell. But I said to somebody this week, Jay-Z's flow changes like every 5 years, sort of like, Primo's production or Dre's, like you want the old thing, you can't have the old thing. He might give you a flash of it. And I really liked when Jay was rapping super in pocket to the beat. And that's just not the move right now. To me, this song, there was a photograph in the last couple of years of Jay with Mac Homie. And I kind of feel like, Mock raps, kind of a free verse and very potent rhymes, makes you pay attention in a different way. And I can kind of see maybe some of that influence. And there's other people that do it too, obviously, but on Jay in this moment, it wasn't, when I press play, it wasn't an instant like, and like you, I keep coming back to it. I'm not done with the song, and maybe in the context of the album or by the end of the year, I'll feel completely different about it. But, it's nowhere near the way I felt about Benny the Butcher and J. Cole with Johnny P's Caddy.
Yeah, we wrote that article back in the day. Sometimes I rap fast, sometimes I rap slow. The different cadences Jay has used over the years. I think that's a testament to his longevity and his continued commercial success at the same level. That said, I think there's also something to, and he also said, infamously or famously onto the next one, brothers want my old flow, buy my old album. That's such a Jay line. I love that. But I also think there's something about returning to the flow that made you, that established you in your prime. And he's done it, on Bam from 444. He goes absolutely berserk on that, and it's that old Hove, and and instantaneously your head is snapping on that song. It's one of my favorite joints from that album. I think I love the experimentation. That said, all experiments don't work, and I think that's fine. You got to try, you got to be flexible. You can't be pigeonholed. This is just one that didn't work for me personally. I didn't hear the Makami reference that you made. To me, his flow is just so like perfectly in the pocket. I think it's impeccable, his flow, and it's almost like a jazz instrument because it's unorthodox and it goes in different directions that you think, but it's always where it's supposed to be. If that makes
interesting. Okay, go ahead.
But I'll say, an example of people who stuck to their flow and done so and remained incredibly core and dear to their fans, including us, is another release that came out early, same day, which was KRS, Redman, and Method Man in the Meth Lab, or
Live from the Meth Lab.
Live from the Meth Lab, from Method Man's upcoming album, and that was just incredible. So it can be done too, but you know, whatever it was, it sonically it didn't appeal to me.
Yeah, but there's, I mean, there's a ton to unpack with the song. And so, you know, first listen, I'm gonna ask you, like, what was your initial like takeaway of what this record's about, what it means, its context, you know, in 2022?
Yeah, so first listen for me has been jaded by the fact of what we do. You know, I think you know, I've talked about covering deaths before. You know, when someone dies in hip hop, we're not able to process it emotionally initially because we got to put on our journalistic hat and think about how we're going to report this story to our readers and put it in a context that makes sense and really reflects and respects the legacy of the people who have fallen. Same thing with the new song. You got to listen to it with the ears of like, okay, cool. What's the narrative going to be? Is this a song that's going to fit the playlist? Really just be professional about it instead of fans. And so I was listening for, you know, within 20 seconds, I knew I didn't like the song sonically or the hook. So then it was like, okay, let me listen to see if there's something lyrical that makes this a newsworthy story. And sure enough, Jay in some of his last lines talks about a topic that's discussed. Jay is always listening. His ear is always to the streets, or he's got people listening for him who report to him, but he always knows what's going on in society and what people are saying. And the lines that caught me were his lines about Biggie. People have said for a long time that Jay-Z wouldn't be Jay-Z if Biggie was alive. Biggie would be the king of New York, blah, blah, blah. He gets criticized for referencing big lines in his songs. And you know, he said that in I forget the song, but he says, I'm bigging up my brother, I'm big enough to do it, you know.
It's on the blueprint.
Yeah, yeah, he's not biting. I'm not a biter, I'm a writer. You know, he's just referencing like jazz notes do. Hip hop is a referential body of work. And so he says that you know, he knows his position. If Big was alive, people would have gotten the commission, which is, you know, was going to be their collaboration album, which would have been incredible. We only got 2 joints from them. I Love the Dough and
Brooklyn's finest. And the commission too, you know, there's speculation over it too, not to interrupt you, but like there may have been other people too, one being Charlie Baltimore, you know, who was Big's, you know, an artist that he was, you know, developing, as well as a romantic partner at the end of his life, and Little Cease being in there. And this was part of a situation that Lance on Riviera was part of too, who was one of Big's managers, and, you know, had this other situation where they were trying to find ways to get money with and without Bad Boy. And you're right, we got those 2, you know, mammoth Jay and Big records. And then Jay did a commission inspired record for the Duets album, which is obviously a posthumous release. As I understand it, the Biggie verse on that song was totally from somewhere else, but Jay, even in the mid 2000s, used that opportunity to kind of say what if with this group, which is again what he did, you know, on Neck and Wrist.
Yeah, so he answers his critics once again, but he says the Hove was always going to be Hove, and so, you know, don't get it twisted, he was always going to do what he was going to do, you know. But what I missed though is he came out swinging from his very first line. He says, the phase I'm on, love, I wouldn't believe it either. I'd be like, Jay-Z's a cheater, I wouldn't listen to reason either. And so that was a clapback at Faizon Love, who I completely missed this storyline. Did you follow it when it happened?
No, I absolutely didn't, but continue.
Yeah, so during an interview on a podcast called the Hip Hop Uncensored, Faizon Love said of Jay-Z, I like Jay-Z, I like him as a guy, and the whole thing he created about this fake dope dealing, that's when I stopped liking him. This guy ain't sold no cocaine in his life. I don't think he's ever won a fight. And then in an interview with DJ Vlad on Vlad TV, you know, he doubled down on it and said, I criticize him for it because it's kind of his fault. And I think he means like all the drug reference talk in hip hop.
Glamorizing, yeah.
Yeah, Jay-Z creates this drug dealing drug lord. I'm a drug dealer, I'm a drug lord. These kids are like, we got to do it too, not knowing that this is all made up shit. So, I mean, those are pretty heavy lines, and I don't know where they came from. I don't know if they have beef or, Faizon was just speaking his mind or what the deal was. But when you then go back and break down that Jay lyric, he says, "The phase I'm on, okay,
Love.
love."
Yeah.
I wouldn't believe it either. So like, and then he says, "I'd be like Jay's a cheater. I wouldn't listen to reason, like double entendre, reasonable doubt, which is all about like that talk either." Like it's a real, he's just such a master at packing in multiple entendres and references within one line, and also giving you subliminal, sneak this, whatever you want to call it. But it got me thinking that Jay-Z is low key the king of sneak disses. So I wanted to talk about that because over the years, this guy has gone at so many people. There are times where he'll use names and stuff like that. And I'm not even going to say sneak diss. He's the king of subliminal disses because I think sneak diss implies that he's trying to hide it. I think he is just doing it in a clever way. And if you know, you know.
You throw a rock, say come outside. It's different than
Yeah.
throwing a rock and running.
Well, you only get half a bar, after you. So
Yeah. You're a
he's
misdemeanor. Yeah.
he's the king of subliminal disses, man. So I wanted to go over some of this dude's disses from over the years. I also think he might be the dude who's brought it against more people than any other rapper. But we can't go over the entire catalog because
No.
we're talking about 25 years of work, and I'm sure that there have been hundreds that went over our heads. But I just wanted to talk about a few notable ones.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny too. Like Jay is somebody who, on reasonable doubt, comes in and says, too much West Coast dick licking. Like he came in swinging. Obviously, Jay had been putting out records at that point for almost over a decade, if you count his first joint with Jaz-O, the one they made as teenagers. But like he immediately stepped in with his first album with that same, I'm gonna say something, and if you take offense, to paraphrase Royce the 5'9", if you feel it's about you, then it's about you. Have it. And from the onset of his career, from the people he stood beside to obviously, people will make much ado about, his stuff with Nas or with Prodigy, Cameron, but you're absolutely right. And it's interesting too, because you and I talking about this, there's a whole lot of subliminal dissing just in the last 5 years alone, for a guy who has, at least a 25-year career, 26-year career of just laying it out like that.
Yeah, yeah. And the interesting thing is that he doesn't just save it for rappers. A lot of times, MCs rap about MCs. He gives it to everyone. Whether you already talked about Tommy Lauren, the news reporter, he gives it to news reporters, actors, rappers, fans, sometimes government officials,
Radio
basketball
hosts.
players,
Yeah.
radio hosts, like whoever wants it can get that smoke from Jay-Z. So I think that's really interesting. So another line before we get into his subliminal disses that like caught people's attention was, he says, "I blew bird money. Y'all talking Twitter feed." That line is so crazy. My interpretation, and I want to get yours because Young Guru, Jay's engineer for basically his entire career, said there were like 5 meanings to it. I don't know if that was like hyperbole, but there's definitely multiple entendres here. I blew bird money. I take as him saying, "Listen, I spent drug money, like big money. Y'all talking Twitter feeds, But I also got the Bluebird reference to the Twitter, but I wonder if that goes deeper and it's talking about Jack Dorsey, the guy who founded Twitter and who created a crypto fund with Jay-Z. So that's Bluebird money right there. Another one is that um, Jack Dorsey's company Square, sister company to Twitter, bought Tidal. So that's more Bluebird money that Jay has gotten. So I got 3, and I'm wondering if there's a Blue Ivy reference in there somewhere that we're not getting. But
I agree with all the ones you just said, by the
yeah,
way.
yeah. Anything else you take from that?
No, I think the internet ran to some extent, and we're trying to question whether it was about Birdman, co-founder of Cash Money Records, and Young Guru stepped out and said that's not the case. But obviously, it's interesting because if you look at Jay's relationship to Lil Wayne, Those are two artists that have dissed each other at times, worked with each other in some of those same times. And then when Wayne wanted off of Cash Money, Rock Nation, you know, at one point, you know, we covered it on AFH. Wayne even said at a show, I'm Rock Nation. And it obviously played out a little bit differently, but I think some interpreted that to mean, you know, Jay one-upping, you know, somebody who's also made the Forbes list quite a few times and is associated with, you know, great wealth in hip hop. But I didn't, when I first heard that and when I've looked back, I don't think he's dissing Birdman. Do you?
I mean, it's hard to not think that a little bit, because, you know, Birdman has also spent a lot of money, and, you know, people, there's been claims at times that he's been kind of down financially, you know, because he's blown a lot of money. But, you know, if Guru's saying it's not aimed at him, I'll take it as that. You know, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of juice in that line. So let's get to the disses, man.
Let me ask you a question though,
Yeah,
before we get to the last 5 years, you
yeah.
know, on the subliminal level, do you, you know, beyond the last 5 years in history, do you have a favorite or a favored person that Jay was getting at, that just as a fan of Jay, you're like, yo, that's the way you do it. That's the way you kind of ruffle feathers.
Well, I mean, for me, it's just the obvious one. It's Takeover. That's one of my favorite Jay songs ever. I think that he went ham at Nas on that, you know, Mobb Deep. He definitely, and the beat was crazy to me. The thing that makes a diss song elite is when it's just a great record too, which is why Drake has been such a master. And the reason why I love Wraith too by Mickey Fax from last year. I just think that great records elevated to a different place. So Takeover for me. How about you?
I've always liked Jay's treatment of the game. You know, the game basically from the onset of his career has had a very complicated relationship with Jay. I think he's often sought approval. He's often wanted kind of an endorsement that he's never received. And the game, you know, especially on those mixtapes. I mean, Game has an incredible mixtape catalog, but he's thrown some very jagged rocks towards, you know, Jay's throne, for lack of a better. And Dear Summer, one of my absolute favorite Jay records, began as a freestyle and then made its way as an interlude on a Memphis Bleak album. You know, many have speculated that while that song applies to Jay being kind of on sabbatical and hiatus, questioning, you know, other people have said, is it about a romantic relationship? You know, when he makes the Peaches and Herb comment, but there's a point in that song where he says, if you're that hungry for fame, MF, or come on, you know, take 2 steps and spin, or 10 steps and spin. I will, as a hip hop fan, as a fan of both these artists, I think he was talking to Game. And I think I've interviewed Game, and Game's even said as much. But I always thought that was just epic. You know, that situation. And I also loved in kind of researching this, you know, J.O. Felony, another West Coast artist, took some big swings at Jay, you know, and basically put his safety in question on the West Coast, brought gang ties into it. And Jay a few times, you know, had that famous line, you're not a felony, you're a misdemeanor. And Jay even saying, you know, I wear more bling to what it in the Soul Train, like he's in LA, nobody touches him. I always just thought those were really cool lines in their time of like, I'm not even going to dedicate a whole song to you. I'm just going to let you know that what you said wasn't possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This Summer might be my favorite Jay song ever. I never took that as a diss song. It's a song with a diss, you know what I mean?
Word.
And he talked about on Rivera too. He says, I just flip an onion, like, you know, referring to the stabbing incident he had where he
I'm sorry, Lance. Yeah, I'm not
yeah. And not trying, I'm just out here trying to, it's just
advance my notes.
Yeah, he's just got such ill lines. Historically though, you know, he's been doing this for a number of years, even on Reasonable Doubt. He had Brooklyn's Finest. And you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, that song was so interesting because Jay appears on it and Biggie has that line, you know, if Faith gets pregnant, she probably have 2 Pacs, get it, 2 Pacs.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was a direct response to Tupac's allegations that he had, you know, a romantic affair with Faith Evans, which, you know, has been speculated throughout history, whether it was true or not. And Biggie makes light of it. And that's kind of like him cracking Tupac's whole thesis of like, all right, you want to say you were with my wife and the mother of my child, All right, I'll give you that, and I'm gonna make a joke about it. And I've read somewhere, I'm trying to think where, that that reaction incensed Pac, who, anyone who's listened to Machiavelli knows the songs that Tupac made in the last 3 months of his life. Jay-Z became as much a target as Nas, as Prodigy. Jay, who had put Reasonable Doubt out in June of '96, suddenly becomes added to Tupac's list of ops. And how does one do that? By standing on a song like that with Biggie, by saying too much West Coast dick licking. Jay puffed his chest up from the onset of his career, and I always thought that was super interesting. And I say that as somebody who's favorite MC of all time. At least the reason I'm here talking to you is Pac. So
yeah, and he had a diss record in the Tuck, supposedly, right?
Yeah, Clark Kent has said that Jay performed it once or twice. So Reasonable Doubt comes out in June. It's a different time back then. I think under today's standards, that song would be out, on YouTube or SoundCloud right away. But Jay performed his response to Pac, but he never put it to album. Whereas you got joints like Drop a Gem on Him by Mobb Deep, like that after Pac's gone, these songs start to appear. Jay never did. But yeah, I mean, he was ready to go to war with an artist with a #1 album, so 2 #1 albums at that point. And then, history obviously had other plans.
Yeah, and Clark Kent said it was one of the most savage diss records he's heard. He said it was a career ender. We've heard that before. We've heard that about Drake having a career ending song for Pusha T.
Yeah.
I don't know that any song can end someone's career. I think we're beyond that. I do think that LL definitely put a chink in Cannabis's career. But I think that if Cannabis had come back with like a crazy hit record, it wouldn't have mattered. I think it's more his creative direction than any disses that L did. Same with Kool Moe Dee. So, but it would have been interesting to hear that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the ones that people talk about all the time, Nas Takeover, Super Ugly, Cameron's Dig a Hole, Prodigy also Take Over, but Jay has had bars for bunches and bunches and bunches of people in his career. A lot of them without saying their name. Again, like I think the bars are direct enough that if you're the intended recipient, you're gonna catch it. But might go, he even says that on Takeover, let's just keep that between me and you, where he's talking about he gives lines just to people, just so that they hear what he's saying on record. You talked about Game already, Mace, Ride or Die, and Imaginary Players. So let's talk about some of the targets that he's attacked over the years. So we've talked about Pac. He went at LL Cool J. At the time, it was when Jay was the president of Def Jam and LL was an artist there. He was toward the end of his time at Def Jam, was not feeling like he was getting the love. Didn't really love the fact that there was an artist who was ahead because he thought that artist would prioritize himself over him. And so, he had words in the press and it got a little chippy between him and Jay. So Jay had a line on I Get Money, $1 billion remix about LL on that. He went at 50 on the Prelude and It's Hot, Some Like It Hot. He went at
I'm about $1 with the F is 50 Cent.
Yeah, yeah.
Epic. And I mean, 50 was, that was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. He went at Joe Budden, who's not short on his list of going at people too. I'd say Budden, 50 Cent and Jay are probably at the top of the list in terms of like targets. He's gone at Drake, and you wrote a big article about that. Lil Wayne, Birdman, Kanye, and even Oasis. The rock band. They talked about rappers and like not playing instruments and stuff like that. And on Jock and Jay-Z, he said he doesn't play guitar, but he's a rock star, and he's even gone to basketball players. He went to Jason Williams, who had an unfortunate event where he shot his driver accidentally, and Jay had bars for him on Guns N' Roses. And then Deshaun Stevenson, who had been in a back and forth with LeBron James verbally, Jay threw some bars his way too on Blow the Whistle freestyle. So he's gone at Donald Trump. Like it just his list is it doesn't have bounds in terms of the types of people. But when you want to go through, so let's start with that the Drake diss. We're only gonna go through the last few or so, but I got
so we're within a 5-year window, yeah. And Jay doesn't, often these kind of subliminals appear on freestyles, on remixes, on radio spots when that was a thing. So he uses, DJ Khaled's album, I Got the Key, the title track, and he says, in real life they like me, in real life I'm like, no, till you own your own you can't be free, till you're on your own you can't be me. And that seemed to be a response to Drake's Summer 16 line, I used to want to be on Rockefeller, then I turned into Jay. Now I got a house in LA. Now I got a bigger pull than Ye. So, and if I'm not mistaken, I think Drake might have even been on that Khaled album, but Jay just, again, creates the distance of don't make those type of comparisons. I'm on my own level. And to your point, there's two people, even maybe three with 50, but there's artists that Jay will reprimand through these type of bars, and then within a 1 or 2 years time work with them. And in some of those cases, like Wayne and Drake, it doesn't mean that it's all peace and love either. They go through their own chapters, but here we are as hip-hop fans with these lines to document it. And at that same time too, it should be noted that was in response to the Drake had also done Rolling Stone interview that he later said, things were said that were off the record, where he had made criticisms of Jay, criticisms of Kanye. So to your point, Jay-Z pays attention to everything.
Yeah. He gave a lot of people bars on 444 when that came out. He came out swinging from the first song, Kill Jay-Z. He had a line where he said, but you ain't a saint, this ain't kumbaya, but you got hurt because you did cool by Ye. You gave him 20 million without blinking. He gave you 20 minutes on stage. F was he thinking? So that's a reference to, at this time, Kanye had gone on a series where when he was on tour, he would always stop the show and just talk about whatever was on his mind. It's almost like a stream of consciousness. The word that blogs, to your point, started using was rant, which I didn't like because it's dismissive. And a lot of times he would say really interesting, thought-provoking things about the financial structure and wealth building and stuff like that. But there was this one time where he started talking about Jay-Z and Beyonce and them, not attending his wedding. He talked about Jay-Z he was talking about Jay-Z owing him money at the time.
There was the killers on payroll thing too that Kanye said,
Yeah. And it was shortly after that, I think it was like only a few days after that he was hospitalized for having a manic episode. But Jay gave him bars on the same song. He gave a bar to Eric Benet. This was about, it was also about some of the infidelities that Hov was acknowledging in his relationship with Beyonce. And he said, you almost want Eric Benet, let the baddest girl in the world get away. I don't even know what else to say. Man, don't never go Eric Benet. So like,
do you remember all the memes going on at the time of like Eric Benet waking up today and acting like life is normal, and then the album coming out? It was like, that was one of my favorite internet meets hip hop moments.
Yeah, it was crazy, man. It was crazy. And then you caught another one in there too.
Yeah, on the same song, he says, I don't even know what you would have done in the future, another brother playing football with your son, which, many speculated was an aim at Future, who, is watching at that point Russell Wilson with Sierra. And interesting.
Raising his son. Yeah. Raising his son. So yeah.
Exactly. And it's just it's super, super wild. And I don't know necessarily the context of that, but again, Jay does this thing at times where if there's something he doesn't like, he puts it in there and sees where the narrative goes from there. It's like a choose your own adventure book.
Yeah.
So you said the point too, like 444 is filled with them. On Smile, another song on the album, he says, no flex zone. This is HOV, brother, who lied to you? And that was in response to Funkmaster Flex at the time, as Flex is no stranger to picking enemies, that could be his friends 1 minute and an adversary the next. And he was very critical in that time of Jay-Z. And if I'm not mistaken, on social media, posted a screenshot of Flex holding a phone with a new text coming in, and it said, this is Hov. So again, it all correlates. On that same song, Jay says, F a slice of the apple pie, I want my own cake, charging my own rate, respect Jimmy Iovine, but he got to respect the Elohim as a whole new regime. And brothers playing for power, huh? So our music is ours. Brothers own their own houses. And that was, that arrived around the same time that 50 Cent went into bankruptcy, for some could say in retrospect, a strategic financial move. I mean, 50 seems to be doing quite well for himself, but made the headlines as this former mogul, former guy who's on the billionaire remix of, with Jay on that I Got Money, was in a tough situation. And whereas Jay has, created his own business, a Black owned business, and done what he's done, I think he was alluding that 50 was very much at the needs of Jimmy Iovine and Interscope and that whole system, which was interesting. And again, that's another case of 50 and Jay can make songs together in between that, I'm about $1 line, and then come back to this. So it never seems to end.
Yeah, absolutely. Next up on that same album was Caught Their Eyes. And this is one where he is very direct about it, makes no bones about it. He says, I sat down with Prince eye to eye. He told me his wishes before he died. Now Londell McMillan, he must be colorblind. They only see green from them purple eyes. So Londell is an entertainment lawyer, very famously is the person who extracted Prince from his recording agreement
with Warner, right?
With Warner Brothers, when he was going around calling himself the artist formerly known as Prince. He had rescinded his name in order to make it difficult for them to market him. He literally shaved Slave into his beard. He was absolutely done with the label, and Londell is the entertainment lawyer who was able to get him off of that label. And so when Prince died, his music was only on Tidal at the time. And I think Londell opened it up. It went in and opened it up so that Prince's music could be on several music platforms. So Apple, Spotify, the whole nine. And Jay had an issue with that. His claim was that Prince only wanted his masters on Tidal because it was Black owned, and he wanted it was symbolic of Prince's desire to have that artistic control, like, what Jay has talked about, controlling your own destiny when it comes to your art. So I don't know if that's true or not, and a lot of people refuted that, but he definitely gave Londell specific bars on that.
Yeah, and we ran a story of Londell appearing on The Breakfast Club and responding to it, and journalism hashtag. So another one on there, Family Feud. Jay went, you didn't mention this among the non-musical figures, but Al Sharpton, and he said, Al Sharpton in the mirror taking selfies. How is him or Pill Cosby supposed to help me? And I think, as you pointed out, this is a follow-up diss to Say Hello, which was almost a decade earlier. And Jay says, if Al Sharpton's speaking for me, somebody get him the word and tell him I don't approve. Tell him I'll remove the curses if you tell me our school's gonna be perfect when Gen 6 don't exist. Tell him that's when I'll stop saying, and then he says the B word, and then he calls Al Sharpton the B word. This is, again, Jay responding similar to Tomi Lahren of, I don't want to call Al Sharpton a political pundit, but talking heads on television or activists that have spoken for Jay or condemned him for his language, for his lifestyle, similar to the Faizon love thing. Jay pays attention and he claps back.
Yeah, absolutely. And bam, so this one, he says, dudes be skipping leg day just to run their mouth. You said that was a Kanye. I didn't take that one as being a Ye specifically, but what jumped out at you for that?
So that comes out 2017. 2016, Kanye puts out Life of Pablo. Remember the lyric, I hit, I make an omelet, all veggies, no eggs, hit the gym, all upper, no legs. And it might not be upper, all shoulders. And that was when Kanye, again, was in the press. He was talking to Charlemagne. He continued to distance himself from Jay, similar to Game of like, I'm going to say things in hopes that we can build a bridge, not a wall. And Jay dropped that line in there without, again, saying Ye's name. And I guarantee you that bar is attached to that.
Yeah.
All chest, no legs. There you go.
Yeah. So again, Jay is paying attention, and he'll come back months, sometimes years later with a response that only you should get. And I think the line after that is something I run the world, so just the entendres are crazy for Jay. Um, on Marcy Me, you want to break that one
Yeah.
down? Yeah.
So this is one that I didn't catch at the time. And, I consider, of the last 5 years, 444 is what I go to. Like that album, I mean, that's a benchmark. I think you, in a discussion on this podcast, consider one of Jay's top 5, right?
Yeah, okay. It's top 3 for me.
I never realized this, especially being with somebody with ties to Philly, but I've been reading a lot on the internet. It can always be a dangerous thing. But the lyrics on Marcy Me are, I'm talking about busting off the roof, hold a Uzi vertical, let the thing smoke. Y'all flirting with death, I be winking through the scope. And that, if you catch the wordplay, very similar to what we're talking about, as it applies to neck and wrist, is aimed at Lil Uzi Vert. And I mean, Lil Uzi Vert by that point, 2017, huge breakout year. But Uzi has spoken a lot about just a lack of, flirting with death and a overall just kind of lack of care for life. And I think that was kind of a warning shot of like, don't do this. I don't support that narrative that you're giving the people. Could be more to it than that. Could be maybe Uzi didn't go with Rock Nation or something like that. But in any event, it's hard to not connect those bars to Uzi.
Yeah. So on What It Feels Like, fast forward a little bit. Now, Jay's output has definitely slowed over the years. He's had some features with Nas, like, DJ Khaled, but he just does a lot of his songs have come out on compilations or soundtracks of late. He's got a couple songs on the Harder They Fall soundtrack, which is dope. But one of my favorite songs of last year was What It Feels Like, another posthumous recording with Nipsey Hussle, the first time they collaborated. Sadly, because it would have happened given Nipsey was on Rock Nation and just their affinity toward one another, as expressed by Nipsey himself on Mailbox Money. But on that song, which is from Judas and the Black Messiah, Jay starts off Scorpion Bricks way before Aubrey's double disc, 40 on my lap, clap sound like 40 did the mix. So that's another kind of like shot at Drake, or at least like I see you kind of thing. 40 on my lap, like just a 40 caliber gun. Just the entendres are always so on point. Later on, though, Ho gives it to the government. Like he just it doesn't matter who it is. He says IRS on my D, try to audit all my checks. Too late. They hate when you become more than they expect. You let them people storm your capital, put their feet up on your desk, and yet you talking tough to me. I lost all my little respect. So the interesting thing about this is that this album came out, I think, in early February, and so that means that Hove laid that verse after January 6th, but before early February. So it came out within like, a week or two after him dropping the bar. And we've seen this more and more on Jail with Kanye. Supposedly Jay laid the verse the day that Kanye premiered it. So the time window between things being recorded and released is getting compressed, which I think is dope.
Yeah, I mean, I have this theory. Jay is an avid art collector. He speaks about it a lot. It's one of the things that Drake even criticized Jay about in that Rolling Stone interview that I think prompted some of these very disses we're talking about. And if you look at somebody like, Jean-Michel Basquiat, he has masterpieces that he toiled over for days and weeks and months. And there were things he did. I mean, he was, the same old graffiti writer at times. There were things that he could do on the flip and have just as much cultural impact, which of course Basquiat never necessarily lived to see realize, like, we have over the last 40 years. But I often look at Jay and I think that as an art collector, he realizes the value in kind of a throw up and kind of a quick scribble. And they often, capture his thoughts in their realest moments. And I think even though we're talking about subliminals, that's very, very true here of like, I read something, I hear something said about me. Let me address it right now, but let me address it not as a tweet, not as an IG post, not as a press run. Let me do it in a verse, and I'm going to kind of make it an Easter egg. I'm going to hide it in there, and maybe you'll see it. Some are more obvious than others, but yeah, I think that's super duper interesting that he could have literally recorded that within days or hours of that incident happening, the Capitol, January 6th.
Yeah, man.
So something that I didn't necessarily realize, that was more recently, but in 2018, Jay put out another album, the Carter's album with his wife Beyonce, which, did you ever look at that album as the third in a trilogy?
Oh, interesting. So Jay does 444, Beyonce does Lemonade, and this is the third. So those are two separate where they're dealing with their issues. One, and this is the Together album. Is that what it was?
So I was reading, and shout out to Pitchfork, because I gotta say, I never processed that as a thematic move of like, okay, Beyonce's testimony, Jay-Z's response, boom, and it totally makes sense of Everything Is Love as the title. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
just interesting fodder.
They also set up the tour, because they
did
a tour off that, and they performed songs from all three projects. So yeah, that's dope. That's dope.
One of your favorite songs in it, and subsequently mine, is Boss. And Jay has a lyric in there of, I'm paraphrasing, but brothers getting jerked, that ish hurts. I take it personally. Brothers rather work for the man than work with me. And that was in direct response to a financial conflict that was going on with him and Kanye regarding Tidal, presumably regarding other business that they had together, those tour obligations. And Jay again uses it to vent his frustration. I'll take another one too from that album, is Friends. And Jay raps, I ain't going to nobody nothing when me and my wife beefing. I don't care if the house is on fire. I'm dying, brother. I ain't leaving. If y'all don't understand that, we ain't meant to be friends. And again, you alluded to it from the quote unquote rants of Kanye's touring in 2016. But Kanye did that famous interview with Charlemagne that he co-produced, and he spoke candidly of, I was truly hurt that Jay and Beyonce didn't come to, I think was it Italy the Kardashians got married? Doesn't matter. Yeah. But Jay didn't show up. And Jay's responding to that and being like, come on, B, like, I've put out this album now last year. And now if you didn't already, everything that was going on behind the scenes, my house was on fire and you're upset that I didn't RSVP. Yes. Like, it's a brilliant line. And again, he doesn't say the loud part loudly. It's all kind of cryptically in there. It's just a dope line. In that same song, he kind of goes at Kim's family where he says, y'all put brothers on a t-shirt, it hurts you and never meet them. And that was when Kendall Jenner and Kylie Jenner were running a t-shirt line with unlicensed images of Biggie and Tupac. And again, I don't know if Jay and Pac ever met, but he's saying like, these are my friends. And in that half a bar, I look at it as you're all, that's a loaded statement too of like, what are you doing to the culture? You're putting this on there. You're not compensating people. You're not compensating the estate. And you didn't even know these people like I did. And I just think that bar is super powerful. So that song is two-pronged like that.
Yeah, it's powerful social commentary, man. It's not all just smoke. He actually talks about what he's really thinking and expresses things that need to be addressed in the culture. And a perfect example of that is in Ape Shit. He says, from the same project, I said no to the Super Bowl. You need me. I don't need you. Every night we in the end zone. Tell the NFL we in stadiums too. So that was in direct response to the year that Colin Kaepernick was being blackballed from the league. Supposedly Jay had been asked to do the Super Bowl and he refused to do it. And he's like, listen, I'm bigger than that. I don't need you. You guys need me. And, we in stadiums too, he and Beyonce did that tour in stadiums. And so they don't need the NFL or any other platform to make them bigger than they already are. Beyonce's done it. Like, he didn't need to do it. And then, truth be, and like, and him manifesting, or at least speaking truth into the universe 2 years later, fast forward, and all of a sudden he is the cultural director for the NFL. And he got a lot of flack for that in the beginning. But, in 2 years' time, he created what many believe is, if not the second best Super Bowl performance of all time, Dr. Dre's Day, with Kendrick, Eminem, 50, Mary J, Snoop,
Anderson
Paak, just list goes on. That was Jay. That was directly Jay's influence. And so everything he said just in 3 lines, it was absolutely true. So it shows the power in the words that he says.
And it coincides. I mean, he was on SNL wearing, a Kaepernick 7 jersey. And he never, it's interesting that he made it as far as he did within the NFL after never mincing his words and lyrics and actions, all of that. And yeah, you're right. And I think it was, I think in 2019, he got, that position with the NFL, and this album came out in 2018. So you talk about manifestation, boom, right. Look no further.
And, he speaks, it's interesting too, because as much as he disses Kanye, or has dissed Kanye over the years, it's almost like when two brothers are fighting, if one person like attacks another brother, then all of a sudden the two brothers are attacking you. There's a song, Meek Mill had a release on his album called Champions, called What's Free. And that's to the same beat as What's Beef, right? If I remember correctly, which was, the Biggie song. And so Jay has a line where he says, "No red hat, don't Michael and Prince me and Ye. They separate you when you got Michael and Prince's DNA." A lot of people took that as a Kanye diss, but we reported, to the contrary. Instead, what he was saying was, listen, I don't get down with the red hat. I'm not down with MAGA and the Trump thing, but don't try and Michael and Prince me. Back in the day, people really tried to create this divide between Michael Jackson and Prince because they were the two biggest. And for whatever reason, people always try and pit, when it's only a few, they try and pit them against one another. We see that with women all the time. We've seen it with
Cardi and Nicki,
and lots of people, right? We saw it with comedians at the time, but he's like, nah, you can't do that. Like, basically only we can do that. You can't do that. But then later on in that same verse, he does give some bars to Trump. He says, "I ain't one of these house brothers you bought. My house like a resort. My house bigger than yours. My spout, come on, man. My route better, of course." So with there, he's talking about Trump and how he's got a better house than the White House, and Trump was always bragging about Melania, but like Jay's wife is Beyonce, so he's like, what are we talking about here?
And there's a double entendre too, right? Like Trump had, and it's amazing given their alignment sense, no surprise to anyone, but Trump on one of the debates, had made comments about Ted Cruz's wife.
Right.
So Trump makes the like, my chick's bad. So Jay's even tying into that. Like, again, every line is related to something. Really interesting.
He said, "I'm not one of these people you bought," which could be a line at Kanye, could be a line at Jim Brown, at a lot of people
Candace,
who were supporting Trump at the time for whatever reasons. But yeah, that one was packed with lines.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Jay gets political and social at times just as much as it's music. Another guest verse, Top Off, the Khaled song, he went at George Zimmerman, who killed Trayvon Martin. And he says, Jay's line is, "Meanwhile, Georgie Porgy Cinnamon sending me threats, save your breath. You couldn't beat a flight of steps. Try that ish with a grown man. I'll kill that F boy with my own hand." And there's real, justified anger behind that. And again, it's one of those cases where I feel like Jay flipping a name isn't even giving that person the dignity of saying their name correctly. And it's just a power move, but you're absolutely right. I mean, Jay does it in music, he does it politically, he does it socially, all over.
Yeah. So why don't you take it home?
Give me one. Okay, my voice is back. And then more recently, talk about Pandemic album, Flux Capacitator with Jay Electronica, which was another case. I feel like that album was made and Jay was like, let me hop on it. But he had a line in there, "You backstabbers gonna turn me back to the old Jay. Old Jay. He's not who you want to see. He's not as sweet as the old Ye." So I mispronounced that deliberately because that's another entendre of obviously OJ's backstabbers. Also, again, to the Lance Rivera, the unstabbing. A lot of people speculated of backstabbers, old Jay, term, like there's play there. And then, this obviously dropped before, a year before jail. Over a year, he and Ye were not on the greatest terms. So he reminds you that the old Jay and the old Ye are different people. And the old Jay isn't as sweet as, early Rockefeller era Kanye. It's just a really interesting line in there.
So with all that said, man, can you think of another MC who has started it with more targets than Jay over the years? And can you think of anyone who is better at these sneak slash subliminal disses?
Nobody's done it more and nobody's done it better. I think that you look at it, it's funny. Like I think Biggie was one of those people who laid it out there. You know, you even look at, you know, and it's not so subliminal, but Biggie, you know, Biggie had major impact even with the Kwame line on Unbelievable, but we only got, you know, 3-4 years of Biggie music. And Biggie stuck to albums in a lot of ways. Jay created his own lane with this, but it's so interesting to me because I think that Drake is absolutely a student of this game, and does it often. But whereas, you know, Jay has a litany of people, I think Drake's, you know, circle of his list of enemies is a little bit smaller, but this is a playbook that Drake absolutely has in his, you know, upper right hand drawer.
Yeah, well, I'll say it straight up. I think Jay is the king of sneak disses, man.
Word.
Uh, really, really dope. So moving on to another song that came out. I was super excited about this because this is one of my favorite rappers of the last 10, 15 years. And we talk a lot about Kendrick here. I love all of TDE, you know, Absol. J-Rock is the person who ushered me into that TD movement. ScHoolboy Q, a record executive who I won't name, once told me they thought that Q was going to be bigger than Kendrick. And this was at around the time of Oxymoron coming out.
Okay.
So you know, Kendrick had just dropped Good Kid, and Oxymoron was I think right after that. And there was an argument, right? Like Q had potentially bigger records. Kendrick was more philosophical and conscious, and you know, but it you know, Q is not bigger than Kendrick, but I think that Q is made his own career path, and it's one that has been phenomenal. Blank Face album was one of my favorite albums that year, if not my favorite. He had an album recently called Crash Talk, and that was one that didn't speak to me the same way that his past projects had. It was the first one that kind of um, let me down a little bit in terms of like what I was expecting. He catered more to, I think, the current sound rather than, you know, just doing a Q album, in my opinion. But it was still, there's some stuff we put on the playlist, and you know, his whole rollout was centered around golf. And by the way, he just did this incredible Tiger Woods commercial, which is super dope for Nike. I don't know if you've seen that.
Oh no, that's dope.
Yeah,
Okay.
he put out this commercial. It's a minute long where he's talking about all the barriers that Tiger Woods broke down and how people don't want people like him, who look like him on the golf course. And Tiger Woods, the guy who allowed, you know, who helped break down those barriers. And
It's
it's
running during the Masters, I presume.
probably, yeah, it
Yeah.
came out a
Wow.
couple days before, so I'm sure it was set up for that. And it taps into a lot of that footage. You should watch. It's super powerful. But he released a song called Soccer Dad out of nowhere. I hadn't heard any rumblings about Q music. And um, it starts off, the soccer dad, my real life too wavy. While I cheer the stands, you little rappers go and wipe your mouth and go pull up your pants. You know? So like he's saying he's a soccer dad, but still and like reprimanding people like he's their dad and scolding people like and but being gangster about it too. Like which is just so cute, man.
Yeah.
Then he says, "Pops never showed up, I think, and it made my life great. The only child raised by women, I had to turn 8." You know, he always is talking about real life stuff in his songs too. And he doubles down on that a little later. He says, "Real life pain, what I'm talking. So I don't play rap. That issue, enjoy what I'm kicking. I'm going through that."
Mm.
The thing that has drawn me to Q the most is that he is one of the most authentic artists I have ever encountered. In his music and his the way he conducts himself. I've interviewed him several times. I've met and interacted with him countless times. I got a great couple of photos of us just laughing because he's always just so funny. You know, he's that dude. Like, but he's gone through real stuff, man, and he's never ever glorified it. The violence or the drugs. He talks about the real consequences of both. And you know, I think he's the truest sense of a gangster rapper. Like, really um, talks about what it really is, man. So to see him grow and turn into a golf person and a soccer dad and talk about that just as really and proudly as he has talked about other aspects of his life, I think is super dope.
Yeah, I mean, and the title isn't necessarily the entire theme of the song. I mean, he's making fun of himself as he's done throughout his career. But yeah, I agree with everything you said. I thought Crash Talk was not a bad album, but it was a miss. And it was not to the level that Q had said for himself. I thought early in his career, just a tremendous artist, like that early 2000 teens, Kendrick, Absol, Q, all putting out some really incredible work purely independently. And I thought that Blank Face was the peak of what a major label Schoolboy Q could sound like. And this is kind of a balance of both. Those bars in there have a lot of heart and soul to them, but unlike Oxymoron, it's in a more positive light. And one of the things we know about Q is, he takes a lot of pride in being a father. So having Made Us Wait, apart from feature verses, this was well worth it. And it's a song that I like even more as I play it than when I first heard it. And I liked it then. And shout out to Tay Beast, Sky Hutch, and Fu. Tay and Sky, I mean, that's TDE, that's royalty. I mean, that's 10 plus years of making some of those early, top dog joints. And at a time where we know Kendrick is, moved on to PG Lang, presumably has, or reportedly has one album left with TDE. It's great to know that Schoolboy Q is in great shape, because we all want to see that team keep on, winning like that.
Yeah, and to that point, I love the way that this was rolled out with no fanfare and also just matter of fact, because it's a powerful statement that it's still business as usual for TDE. The show must go on. I also wonder if the fact that they released this song means that a new Q album is coming soon, and if a new Q album is coming soon, I wonder if that means that Kendrick's album is not coming for a while, because I guess it could go either way, but like typically TDE likes to focus its attention on the project that it drops, and so the whole thing's for a minute to like work that current project, and so I'm wondering if this means that we're gonna be waiting even longer for the next Kendrick album.
Yeah, one can wonder, but to your point, overall, I mean, TDE keeps you always on your toes. You never know. For all that we know, they could drop on the same damn day.
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
crazy.
crazy.
So a couple of other just points of note this week. Kanye stepped down from Coachella. Yeah, were you planning on going to Coachella this year?
Nah, man. I think my Coachella days are over. I was talking about that just the other day. It's cool and everything, but it's a trek. And yeah, nah. So no.
I've never gone.
I will say this: if I paid to like get Kanye and they subbed in the weekend, I wouldn't be happy.
Yeah, I would be a little bit bummed. But yeah, I've never, even in my single days, I never looked at Coachella as a place for me. But
I did see Kanye at Coachella back.
Oh, you did?
I think it was like 2012 or something like that.
Pre-Yeezus.
Yeah, it was a dope show. It was a really, really dope show. Like it's everything you would expect from Kanye, grand lights and stuff like that. And that's no shade to The Weeknd. I'm just saying they're just very different artists. Like it's not.
Yeah.
It's a weird substitute for me.
It's a weird swap. I wonder how that's working. How if fans were super upset. But in other concert news, just want to give a shout out. We mentioned his name earlier, but LL Cool J is reviving the Rock the Bells Festival. He's headlining with DJ Z-Trip, one of my favorite mashup DJs, and has been working with L for years. Other headliners, is a pretty dope lineup. August 6th, but it's Ice Cube, Jadakiss, Lil' Kim, Rick Ross, Fat Joe, and Remy Ma. Jadakiss is there, so is Dipset, Nori, and then a couple more that will really resonate with AFH fans, Scarface and Diggable Planets. And for go ahead.
It's a smart lineup because everyone you mentioned is either got a strong social presence or has been on Versus. It's almost like a greatest hits Versus. So you can see LL tapping into that cultural zeitgeist with it.
Very, very true. And what's cool about Face is he's doing the 20th anniversary tour of The Fix, which, I think The Diary got 5 mics in the source, but The Fix is the one album that he didn't release on Rap A Lot in that run. It was Def Jam album, Jay on it, Kanye produced, Dub C. It's I love that album. I think it's incredible. I don't know that I would go and say it's his best, but it's definitely top 3. And I love that, you know, Face, who's come such a long way personally, professionally, you know, been through COVID, gone into politics, all these different things, is coming back and honoring a classic like that. And the event is hosted by Roxanne Shante with music by DJ Scratch. Again, another Versus alum, and the finisher, Mr. C. So that should be dope. Maybe even you and I will link up out there in August.
I would love to do that. I love that Scarface album. It's probably my favorite too. You know, the interesting thing too, being in Cali, is I've been listening to the radio K-Day, and there's a Crush Groove tour that's coming too. Have you heard about that?
No.
There's a Crush Groove Fest. I'm not sure who all's on it, but Ice Cube is also a headliner for that, and it sounds like it's the same demo. So I'm curious as to how those two are going to play with one another, and like what the distance is between them. But it's dope to see um, two festivals dedicated to this demographic.
Absolutely. You know, also in kind of hip hop legend news, you know, pioneers, Kid Creole. Just want to update. There's a comprehensive article on our site. Kid Creole 2017. We've talked about it a couple of times. Was involved in a New York City Midtown confrontation with somebody that the other person was stabbed, allegedly, fatally. And this week, Kid Creole was acquitted of second-degree murder, but convicted of manslaughter, which is interesting because if you read 2021 piece that The Source published, you know, Kid Creole has maintained his innocence all along, said there's surveillance tapes that corroborates his part of the story, and that there's a good chance this man that he did have, you know, some level of an altercation with, perhaps died to injuries unrelated to that incident. I encourage anyone to read the story. You know, we talk a lot about justice and injustice, and it's just worth reading. But Kid Creole, you know, a Grammy inductee, as a legend, you know, as an icon award, and also somebody who's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And this story absolutely matters. You know, I know he might not have been the dominant voice in Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, but Kid Creole, you know, he's a brother of Melly Mel, very influential to this culture.
Yeah, it's really sad, man. We reported on it back in the day. Just the whole circumstances sound strange and avoidable, you know, but it's sad all around. Yeah,
It is, and he could face up to 25 years. He's already spent the last 5, you know, sitting on Rikers Island, just about 5 years awaiting this trial. Before we bounce, you want to talk about new music real quick?
yeah, let's do it.
So I really, you know, shameless plug for the AFH playlist. You know, shout out to you. You often run point on that, but it's in a tremendous place. We just crossed 15,000 subscribers, so I love that. I love the fact that we are competing with the big gun, so to speak, and having a stake in this culture and curating dope music. But there's been a lot of great music that's come out. I'll start with a project that I never saw coming. I'm in Pittsburgh today. Girl Talk. I just mentioned Z-Trip. Girl Talk is another DJ that, you know, became a legend for mashing up different cultures as a DJ and then a producer. And he, over the years, did stuff with Waka Flocka, Freeway, different people. But he put out a project called Full Court Press with Big K.R.I.T and Smoke DZA. And similar to the way of Jay-Z on the J Electronica album, Wiz Khalifa is a dominant featured guest on the album too. So, you know, K.R.I.T, DZA, Wiz.
You know, I've seen this as billed as Wiz, K.R.I.T, and DZA, and like all of them. Like
yeah, but it's different because they're not all on each other's songs. And then,
yeah.
But you're right, you know. Yeah. But it's really cool. Came out on Big Beat, which I didn't even realize was still a label. You know, shout out to Craig Kalman. But it's been enjoyable. You know, it definitely has. These are not artists. I mean, with Wiz, I think you think of party vibes, but you know, with K.R.I.T, he's made some strip club records, and DZA makes, you know, that DZA music, Smokers Club type vibe. But it came together, and my favorite song on the album is the one you put on the playlist called "Revenge of the Cool."
Yeah, the dope thing is that these guys have collaborated a lot in the past. Like this is almost like a full circle moment, because in that 2010, 2011 mixtape era, you know, K.R.I.T was here, and Kush and OJ and all that, and you know, all that stuff.
George Kush.
Yeah, that's when they were, and I think they were talking about making a joint project back then. So to see them do that this now, and seemingly out of nowhere, is pretty dope.
Yeah, and with Girl Talk too, who, I mean, you know, I know you were a fan of you know, Cosmo Baker and the Rub. Like, if you were in Pittsburgh in the mid 2000s, I was at a lot of bar and kind of like house parties with Girl Talk with DJ. I know I said I wasn't in it for Coachella, but those parties were amazing. And, you know, shout out to Greg. And it's just a good look all around. So I've enjoyed that. And that's the track to start with, though. Revenge of the Cool. Also, you want to talk about the Vince Staples album?
Yeah, Vince, I hadn't heard anything about this either, but Vince Staples put out an album called Ramona Park Broke My Heart. And Vince has actually been pretty prolific over the last couple of years. His last album, I can't remember the title, but he had a song, um, "Trippin'," that we had on the playlist for a year. Taking Trips, called Taking Trips, and I just took it off literally on Friday. I could every time I saw it, I couldn't bear to take it out because it's just such a dope song. But getting this project was great. It's got, you know, DJ Mustard's part of it, Ty Dolla Sign, Little Babies on it. Um, when Sparks Fly is one of the highlights, and A Free the Homies. Um, you know, those are songs that are on the playlist. I think that people who are Vince Staples fans will be really pleasantly surprised by this. It's one of my favorite on first listen of his albums, period, in his catalog, and I think that's just going to grow. But what was your take on it?
Yeah, I agree. I'm only one listen deep on the album. I'm a few listens on the inclusions you put on the playlist. But Vince Staples, there's a few artists in hip hop, you know, one of the age old questions is like, what's an artist that everyone that you look up to really likes that you might not see the light? And, you know, when I was a kid, it was always Raekwon. Like, you know, on the first Wu-Tang album, you know, gravitated towards meth. Like RZA's rhymes, always been an Inspector Deck fan. And then over time, as you get the knowledge, like, I've come to, you know, you asked me on the right day, raise my favorite member. Vince Staples is somebody for the last decade that so many people I respect sing his praises. And absolutely, he's made songs that I've liked, but he hasn't made projects that have, you know, really hit me over the head. And this one really seems to, because he's really in his own lane. There's so much depth and vulnerability and just honesty to Vince, and that comes across in this album. So it's one I owe quite a few more listens to, but at first glance, I'm like, damn, this one is, you know, is kind of earmarked towards my lists going into the rest of the year.
Yeah, Vince is a star, man. I've said for a long time, just looking at his interviews, he's so funny and quick-witted. I think that I'm going to go on a limb and say that he's going to go the Joe Budden Nori route, and ultimately he's going to be known as a personality slash actor or host or whatever it is, more than he is a musician, because he's just a super talented dude. His voice is so unique and funny and sharp. I don't think that there's many out there like him.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, to your point, I'll watch a Vince Staples interview with Sway or The Breakfast Club, or he, you know, calls into Joe Budden from time to time, and he makes you want to listen to the music. And there's two other people that have had that impact on in my years as a hip hop fan. One is Killer Mike, and Killer Mike was phenomenal at that in the years before Run the Jewels, when he was an independent artist who, you know, was kind of kicking in the underground, you know, between Outkast and whatever was next. He stayed relevant through just being so damn real. The other is David Banner, and David, you know, has always been somebody who I make it a point to tune into his interviews, his podcasts, and over the years, it's made me a fan of not just his music, but his early group Crooked Letters and everything that he's a part of. So I love that quality, because that's why interviews and media runs should exist. So
yeah, for sure.
Another note just on the album tip is Paul Wall and Termanology put out a record that's a collaboration. You know, Paul Wall in recent years has been kind of running around the Static Selector circle, but it's called Start to Finish. In addition to a ton of Static production, Pete Rock did a joint. Bun B, an artist you're very passionate about, Fly Anakin, Crooked I, King Crooked, Waze P, and Nems are on it. I've really enjoyed this. You know, few artists in hip hop are more prolific than Termanology. Seems like every year he puts out half a dozen projects. And you know, I loved his Politics as Usual, his debut album back in like 2006 with a wish list of great producers. But I think he's an artist who really thrives in the collaborative space. He did a joint with Little Fame back in the day from MOP called Physiology. And this is one, I mean, in theory, like, you got a rapper from Texas, guy from Massachusetts, New York by way of Mass, and they make it work. And I've been enjoying that one in the car, especially.
Yeah. Paige Kennedy, artist who's been a friend to us for a number of years now. We've had him on our playlist quite a bit. And the most recent one is a remake of the grand finale featuring my son, King Crooked,
3D Nati.
Yeah, a bunch of folks.
Graph.
Was Papoose on that too?
Graph. I don't think Pap was. Yeah.
He had a lot of people, and it was
Locksmith too. Anyway.
Yeah, Locksmith. Right. And he recently put out a song called Front Page. Interesting thing is, so Page is also an actor. A lot of people may know him from Weeds, a show where he played this character, kind of character U-turn. He's been in, I think it was the Meg,
the Shark movie,
and a bunch of other projects. He's a very established actor, but he's a great rapper too. From Detroit, comes from that ethos, Elzai and Royce and all the great MCs there, and really prides himself on his music. And he put out a song called Front Page. It's very personal. I believe personally that it's one of his best records yet. We texted about that this week, and I told him that I think it's an incredible record. The sound, the substance, everything. And so tremendous growth for him as an MC. We had him on our showcase at AFH for AFH at South by Southwest back in 2016, I believe it was.
17, yeah.
17 with Elzai,
King Crooked,
Nick Grant, Rhapsody, Ninth. It was a dope showcase. Page was a great part of that. And then the last was what we mentioned earlier, Method Man, Redman KRS-One, live from the Meth Lab. This is a true ode to the boom bap. Each MC comes with its finest. Just really dope song, and big winner on the playlist too.
Yeah, Meth still ain't cursing. And this, I had to look. Meth hasn't worked with KRS apart from one song on the Bulworth soundtrack, the title joint with Cam and everyone else, and Red appeared on I Got Next. But this is a banner collaboration. And, Chris released an album already this year. But I have to say, Chris has fire in his belly. It's good production for him. I really like the song. And if you press play on our playlist, if you listen to this shortly after this comes out, it's the first thing you hear. And shout out to Jojo Pellegrino too, who people may remember from back in the day. He does the chorus. The last song I'm gonna mention is my song of the week though. And it's one we haven't talked about, you and I think I texted it to you yesterday, but it's called Alive Ain't Always Living by Quelle Chris, part of the Mellow Music Group family. Some may know him as husband to Jean Grey, but even apart from that, I mean, Quelle, for really the last decade, has been one of the most interesting MC producers, phenomenal at both, but has this irreverence and this ability to say super profound things. And he's kind of a blender, somebody who lived on the West Coast, the East Coast, Michigan, has that ability to kind of be a gap between Billy Woods and Odyssey and Alchemist and all of those. But this song, it's the first single off his upcoming album. Man, I might venture to say, apart from Johnny P's Caddy, it's my second favorite song of the year. I listened to it, no lie, 12 times yesterday. Wow. And I'm really eager to hear that album. So shout out to Quelle and Mellow Music Group and all of that. But do you have a song of the week?
I haven't heard it yet. I'm a press play right after this podcast. Did a great job setting that one up. My song of the week is ScHoolboy Q, Soccer Dad, man. I love that song. I like I said, I'm just such a huge fan of Q. I'm so happy to hear him back. I think that it portends a great album. So yeah, very excited about that.
Word, man. Well, yo, this was another great episode. Thank you for 80 episodes, man. And here's to 80 more.
Absolutely, man. Yo, always a pleasure.
Likewise, man. Until we do it again.
All right, peace.
Peace.